everybody, Dan Illman, Mike Beer taking a look at the DRF race of the day for Friday, May the 31st. It's a huge evening of racing at Penn National. Race number 6 is the Grade 3 Penn Mile. 3-year-olds on the turf for $400,000. Let's take a look at this field. We've got a pretty strong group in here, Mike. The number 10 Trickery just won a graded stakes race at Churchill Downs. He did get a perfect trip that day, and he was a zillion to 1. Now you got to take a much shorter price for the Great Graham Motion.
Yeah, and you got to do it from the far outside post as well. I think it's a great spot for this horse, Dan. And listen, big price or not, he ran really well last time against a really good field. There are other interesting horses in here, though, as well.
Let's throw up our time form US pace projector. Penn National, I was talking to a lot of the trainers when writing up the advances for the stakes at Penn National on Friday, and they feel that it's very tough to close on the Penn National turf course. You want to be close. The pace should be fast, however. Tropenhagen's got good early speed. The good news is the 2 Good Lord Lori is tactical and should sit a good trip.
Yeah, I can see Good Lord Lori. She got a good trip in his most recent start. I can see him getting another good one here. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with the fast pace designation, Dan, but maybe it will be fast. We'll see, what kind of position Trickery can get from post 10. I also feel like you're going to get some speed from the 7 set, Dan. He's a very handy racehorse, but if they want this horse close, he will be close.
And First World War has shown a little bit of tactical speed in the past. Aspenite is a stretch-out sprinter that's won going 2 turns. It's interesting that the one time Steve ran this horse, a route of ground on the turf, it was a $500,000 race at Kentucky Downs, and the horse won as much the best on the lead. And since then, after one dirt start around 2 turns and off turf heat, they've kept him sprinting.
Yeah, I agree with that. It becomes even more confusing, Dan, when you look at his pedigree, because his pedigree is all distance on the turf, and they don't want to stretch this horse out. To me, it's kind of a bad sign. I also feel like it's probably not a great sign that this horse is running 2 recent stakes races, and he was $1,000,000 to 1 both times. I mean, I don't like that stuff about him. I do like this post position for him, though. I think there are intangibles here that make me want to be interested in him. I just don't like him that much.
They put blinkers on last time out in the William Walker Stakes. He finished 7th. I didn't think it was a horrible performance, but now the blinkers go back off. I do think he has enough tactical speed stretching out where if he breaks, he can work out a very nice trip from close to the pace. Good Lord Lori is 2 for 2 in his career, including this victory in the Woodhaven Stakes last month at Aqueduct. It's his first start off of a long layoff. Flavien Prat gave him a perfect trip.
He got a really good trip in this race, but he also really runs off of a very long layoff here. The horse that he's going to gun down, who is a big long shot, the Big Torpedo, but that horse got the jump on Good Lord Lori and actually is not giving this thing up through this stretch. I just like the performance from this horse. George Weaver, who doesn't, he's on a suspension right now, but he had a great year last year, Dan, with 2-year-old turf sprinters. This horse looked as good as any of those horses winning at Saratoga. He was really impressive. This horse can run.
This horse can run, and as we saw from the pace projector, he is tactical. I think he can work out a nice trip in the second flight, and if all the traders I talked to are right, you want to be close to the pace, he'll be 1, 2, 3 likely when they turn for home. The 3 is Tropenhagen, who won his career debut at Monmouth with a big figure for a first-time out 2-year-old. I still thought when you watched that race that maybe you had to peel the onion back a little bit and not believe that number, and since then he's run 3 times and hasn't gotten back to it.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with your take on his debut. I don't want to knock him too much. He did what he had to do in there. It's just not an overall performance in field that I was thrilled with. And I was interested to see what he would do out of it. He hasn't run that well out of it, especially in the 2 turf starts, but they were both stakes races right off a maiden win, both really fast paces too. It may not look it in that Laurel Futurity, but that pace was strong and he was clear in there. Hopefully he's grown up a little bit and learned his lessons. He was hard to rate last year. But if he can settle down a little bit and pull a different trip in here, maybe he bounces back.
That's an excellent point because he's been his own worst enemy in those 2 stakes races because he just refused to settle. When you're a runaway going against good horses on distance of ground on the turf, it's going to be very, very tough to hold on. We'll see if he's a more mature individual returning off about a 5.5-month layoff. First World War is the number 4, and this guy won the Kitten's Joy 2 starts back at Gulfstream, and he utilized his good tactical speed to sit just off the pace, and he grinded it out. Brendan Walsh ran him in the Transylvania last time out, and Brendan just didn't think he cared for that turf course. He thought it was more soft than good. He wants to give him another chance here.
Yeah, I mean, the final time of that race in the Transylvania would suggest it was a little softer than good. We'll see, Dan. He's the second choice on the morning line. I think he makes a lot of sense on paper. His overall form is rock solid. I happen to not be a very big fan of his. I don't really like any of his races that much. And so just as one of the favorites, he was kind of one of the horses I wanted to fade in here. You can't like them all. I think there were other interesting horses in this race, and I sort of wanted to fade him, but I do recognize that he's a contender in here.
If Timeform US is correct and this pace is fast, with a horse like Troppenhagen in the race, it could certainly be fast. Maybe it sets up for a guy like the 5, Dancing Groom, who was a grade 1 placed as a 2-year-old, although well beaten in the Champagne over a wet track. They tried turf for the first time in the English Channel. I think he ran a little bit better than it looks, and maybe if you give him some pace, he comes with a late kick and spices up your single race exotics.
It's going to be a big price. Maybe he gets a big pace to run at, and he takes the necessary, pretty big step forward that he's going to need to take here. And I just don't like his races enough to, to be interested in him at any kind of a price in here. And we're going to talk about that English Channel a little bit more as we go on here. He's not the horse that I want out of that race.
The horse you might want out of that race is the 6, Please Advise. And you talked about George Weaver's ability last year with 2-year-old turf sprinters. This guy won the Atlantic Beach coming from off the pace. And in his first start of the year, he ran in the English Channel, and he was just in and among horses, dropping down towards the rail. He was full of run, and he just ran up onto heels. He never got a clean trip, and considering it was his first start off of the layoff, it was a really promising performance for a horse that needed to prove that he wants a route of ground.
Yeah, and maybe he still does in some ways, but now they've stretched him out twice, Dan. He didn't win either of them, but he ran fine both times. And I'm with you. I feel like we're going to look at the replay of the Channel a little bit later, and he's probably the one you want to keep an eye on. You're not going to see like any terrible trouble for him. He was just never in a comfortable spot at any point in that race, and he still ran on at the end. I thought all in all, it was a pretty promising performance.
Set is the number 7, and this horse won his first 2 starts up close to the pace at Gulfstream Park. Now, they were slow-paced races, but this horse ran both times and was just striding out through the stretch. He never got a fair chance in the American turf. He missed the break completely, and Mark Casse told me that Jose Ortiz just said he shut it down right away.
Yeah, I mean, he just didn't get out of the gate well, and then he got bumped and into a stumble. He winds up last. I feel like that's the kind of race, even if you wanted to see more out of him at some point in the race, and he didn't really do anything, I think you want to be a little bit lenient, especially when you go back and look at his first 2 starts, because, man, did he run well in those, and he's so handy. I just love the way in the second career start especially, he could have been on the lead in there. They just took a hold of him. They were content to sit off of another rival in there. And then he went about his business very easily, I thought, that day. This horse has some talent. I wonder if he gets overlooked just a little bit in here, because that last running line looks terrible.
Messi El Jaramillo regains the mount. He was aboard for both victories down at Gulfstream Park. Freedom Principle pulled off a 21-1 upset in this race, the English Channel. Now, he's on the far outside, commencing a 5-wide bid. Keep an eye, though, on Please Advise, who's now 2 off the 2 path now, driving down inside. Freedom Principle is going to get into the clear. Please Advise doesn't.
Yeah, Please Advise never gets a clear running here. I'll give Freedom Principle credit for being really game in here. He's just going to get up at the end. All in all, I just thought it was an okay performance. Although it was a move in the right direction for him. He's 5-1 on the line, Dan. I'm not taking it. He's not the horse that I wanted out of the English Channel. And I don't think you're getting any value if that morning line price holds.
He did get a good pace to run at in that race, but he was also giving up a lot of ground. It's tough to make that prolonged wide run through the turn into the stretch at Gulfstream. You're right in describing him as game that day, but he was a big price, and now will be a much shorter price. I know Map's going to be a big price, the number 9. He's trying turf for the first time. They tried stakes horses last time out. He caught a very wet track in the private terms against a good 3-year-old on the Mid-Atlantic scene in Copper Tax. We'll try turf here for him. It's a big ask.
Yeah, you got surface questions here. You got distance questions here. You have class questions here. If you do find something to hold on to, he's going to be a big price.
And Trickery, after running greenly in his debut for Graham Motion, has come back and has done little wrong, winning 3 of 4 starts, a stake on the synth and the graded stake with just a perfect trip last time out at Churchill Downs, where Spilly got him out of the gate, was able to save ground. They got to the outside, and he stormed home. Now, I'm not sure he deserved to be 47-1 in that race based on his previous running lines, but now you got to take a lot less.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues here. I still think it's a good spot for him. His rush away 2-back was a good performance. The turf lost 3 back in February. He was best that day. He actually ran really well in there. And then he, sort of put it all together. The trip helped a lot last time, Dan, but man, did he really run well in there, and he beat a really good field that day. And now they just come back in a spot where he just makes a ton of sense. I feel like you're obviously going to take a much shorter price here. I'm not. This horse deserves to be a short price in this race. All of his races are good.
Before we take a look at our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. Let's take a look at our top picks. For the Penn Mile, it's a fairly wide open race, Mike. I like that you're going to give Set another chance because he just lost all chance at the break last time out. And if he breaks well, you mentioned that he's handy. I don't think he's a need the lead type or a horse that has to be right up close to the pace. I can see him sitting fourth or fifth and commencing a nice sweeping move on the turn.
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things about it. He didn't get any kind of a trip in here. If this pace doesn't really develop, they can just put him on the lead if they want to, but they don't have to do that. I like that about him. Dan, I'll be very interested to see how they bet this race because I do want to wait and see what the prices look like. But if this horse gets overlooked at all and he's around that 6-1 morning line, I think it's value. This horse might be okay.
I think Trickery is okay as well. I talked
Yeah.
to Graham Motion, and he said he wasn't sure about running this horse back so quickly, but he just seems to be getting better and better. He just felt that for $400,000 was too good of an opportunity to pass up. Now he's got to work out a trip from the outside. Curious to see what Please Advise the 6 does off that trouble trip. 7-2-10-6 for Mike, 10-8-6-1 for me. Grade 3 Penn Mile kicks off a Penn Pick 5 mandatory payout on Friday. It's a nice card at Penn National. Good luck.